Welcome into my dog's favorite live edition of the podcast, the Dynasty Dogs. Tonight, we're going to be talking about several current Dynasty topics that are happening around the Dynasty landscape. A lot's been going on these past few weeks. We're getting in kind of the meat and potatoes of the season. And then we are going to be talking about three draft eligible players for the 2025 draft in Cam Ward, Tre Harris, and Omarion Hampton. I forgot there for a second. But I'm very excited to talk about these guys. I believe this is the first time I've used this system to do live. So I believe that there's a live or chat that you guys can ask questions in. But yeah, there it is. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. But the first thing we are going to talk about is the trade of Diontae Johnson to the Baltimore Ravens. So Diontae was traded with a 6th-round pick to Baltimore for a 5th, so basically a pick swap. And sorry, guys, I'm trying to figure this chat thing out, so we'll see how this goes. But basically, what this means to me, and is Diontae's dynasty value is it doesn't really do much, to be honest. Baltimore's not a team that throws the ball extremely much. There are a plethora of pass catchers on that team. Mark Andrews is starting to come back to life a little bit. Zay Flowers, I think, is just an immensely talented wide receiver. Rashad Bateman has been starting to come into his own a bit, and unfortunately, he dropped a wide open pass last week. That would have been big yards for Lamar, so that's possibly why they made this trade. But this is one of those things where it doesn't really move the needle for me in regards to Diontae, his dynasty value or his fantasy value in general. This does hurt the stock of the Baltimore pass catchers because that's now just another mouth to feed. In regards to Zay and Andrews, Bateman, all those guys are now affected by that. But this is stock up for guys like Leggett and Jalen Coker, who was an undrafted free agent this past year. Both guys were drafted, but Jalen was the undrafted. So I think this bit is bigger for Leggett than it is for anybody. Leggett has been a red zone target for the Carolina Panthers the past several weeks. He's had three touchdowns in the red zone this season. Was the second most targeted before Diontae was traded, so now he's the most targeted on that team now that Diontae's gone. And I expect for that role to continue for Diontae, or for Leggett. So this, I mean, if you could get Leggett for a second, I'd be okay with that. He's not really someone I'm currently targeting, but I do think his value is slightly increased, especially with Diontae leaving. And Jalen Coker, really good story. I kind of like his nickname. I don't really know if I could say it on here or not, but the nickname that his fan base has right now is pretty funny. He's been very, very good. For the past he had a really good week last week. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little frazzled trying to work this live stream out now. My dogs are barking, so of course it's the dog's favorite podcast. But anyway, I do think this gives him a little life to make a role for himself. Coker, I mean, try to keep his job secure for next year because again he's an undrafted free agent, so this is one of those guys that really needs to earn his spot, and this is a big opportunity for him for a team that has a lot of holes and not a whole lot of mouths to feed. So if he can keep this up and he can, show out, he could be a nice little, sleeper for next year. I don't know if I'm really buying just yet. I kind of want to see how this offense looks the next few weeks. If you can get him for like a 4th, maybe late 3rd, because those picks are just gambles anyway, even for the 2025 classes. Those picks are just all gambles. So you could just gamble on Coker, who is in the league already. And if I'm saying his name wrong, I'm a Philadelphian, so that is something we do normally. We added the S to Alshon Jeffrey, which he doesn't have an S at the end of his name, so we called him Alshon Jeffries for the longest time. But yeah, those are two, stock ups and stock downs for that team. I do think this hurts Zay Flowers the most out of anyone because I feel Zay is a more explosive Diontae Johnson at this point. And again, it's just for a team that doesn't really throw the ball, they didn't really need a pass catcher like Diontae. I felt like they needed more of a, how do I put this? Big body, explosive type of guy, go up and get it. because they have a lot of these 5'11" shifty players. So I'm not really sure how this is going to work out, but we'll see. The next biggest thing in Dynasty right now is the Anthony Richardson debacle. And I say it's a debacle because it's a debacle on himself and on the Indianapolis Colts. Because, the Colts carousel has just been ongoing for years now. Last week did not do well, 10 for 32, 175 yards and a TD. He was 2 for 15 at one point, or 2 for 19, something crazy like that. There was, multiple drops in that game from his wide receivers, but the biggest story of that entire game was him basically tapping himself out. As an NFL quarterback, as a leader of that team, you can't do that because it's just a bad look for you. It's a bad look for your organization. It's a bad look for your coaches. It's a bad look for your conditioning, especially for a guy who was one of the most athletic players in this past, 2 drafts ago. A guy who absolutely crushed the combine, 99th percentile in everything, or 100th percentile, whatever you want to call it. Absolutely crushed it. And for him to be like, oh, I was tired, is just, dude, you can't do that. Lie. Zaire Franklin said on his podcast, bro, just lie. Just say anything else but I'm tired. You could have come up with anything, Oh, I tweaked my hamstring. I stubbed my toe and I didn't think I could keep going for a play. Or don't say you're tired. I'd rather you say you stepped on a Lego than, say you're tired. But he is a guy for Dynasty that I know a lot of people, I've heard it, I've seen it, are just willing to pretty much get rid of for anything that they can get. I can't do that, especially for what you had to give up to get Anthony Richardson, whether it be in startup drafts or rookie drafts, trades. He was a top 4 or 5 rookie pick, a top 12 QB pick, in startup drafts, multiple first round pick trade asset. I can't give him up for anything. For me, to me, honestly, right now, I'm holding. And if I'm going to move him, I'm waiting until he plays again and starts showing signs of life and then moving on from him. But again, this is not one of those things that I can just say, yeah, I'm giving up on a 22-year-old kid. Because we talked about this a few weeks ago with Bryce Young when Rich was here. That, they kind of pulled the plug on him a little too early. Now, you could say, Richardson came in underdeveloped as a quarterback, a project quarterback. The dude only has like 10 NFL games under his belt, and most of those games he never finished, or some of those games he never finished. So who knows how many he actually has. You kind of have to let him, play it out, to be honest with you. And I think the whole tap out thing probably played into Shane Steichen benching him. Allegedly, this was a Shane Steichen decision, and Shane didn't really give him a reason as to why he was benched. But yeah, I honestly just can't move on from him right now. 22-year-old athletic freak, even though he did tap out, I just can't think about moving on from him. And if there's a coach I could trust to get this figured out, I've said it a bunch of times on here, it's going to be Shane Steichen. Again, worked wonders here in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts. They have a good team in Indianapolis, a good team, and not a team that's like Super Bowl bound or anything like that. So that's why the benching for Joe Flacco is kind of a head scratcher, because they're not really going to win. And that's what I was kind of confused about Carolina too, in regards to benching Bryce Young for Andy Dalton. They're not winning anything. You're not winning the Super Bowl. You're not a real contender, especially not Carolina. So let the young guy play it out. Let the young guy figure it out. He has to figure it out. You spent the draft capital on him. But what that means for the Colts now is Joe Flacco. This is going to be tough. So to me, if you're a contender and you can give up a third for Joe Flacco, you can do it. I'm not giving up any more than that. I'm not giving up a second for a, I believe, 40-year-old or close to 40-year-old quarterback who is not the future of that team. Probably has we're in week 9 now, 8 weeks left if they don't go back to Anthony Richardson. Probably not going to get a starting job anywhere else. So anything more than that, I'm not willing to give up a third or a fourth, 2 4s, a mid 3 to help you win. I would do that. We've seen Joe Flacco with his time as a quarterback at the Indianapolis Colts. He was QB 15, QB 4, and QB 18. So they were solid numbers, solid, one extremely good, and then the other two were mid QB2 finishes. So what this really means is big news for Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. With Joe Flacco quarterback, Downs was wide receiver 8, 18, and 14, which were 3 of the 4 best weeks Downs has had so far this season. And for Michael Pittman, who's had a slow season, been banged up, Anthony Richardson really hasn't helped him, to be honest. He's been wide receiver 20, 23, and 28, which have been his best weeks. All of those are wide receiver 2 outside of 28, which is a low end 3, early 3. So to be honest, this is good for those guys. This is great for their end of the season outlook, especially Pittman and Downs. I think these guys could be end of the season league winners with Joe Flacco at the quarterback position, unless Anthony Richardson comes back in, and then I'm going to be a little nervous again unless he gets it figured out. But with Joe Flacco, I'm pretty excited for what those 2 wide receivers could do, because if you've listened to this show for a while, I've been a big Michael Pittman guy. And Josh Downs has been very good. I wasn't super high on him coming out, but Michael Pittman was a guy I've really enjoyed. Just one of the most underrated wide receivers in football. But he just had a tough season so far. And a lot of people were off of him. And I'm ready to get back in. A late first from Michael Pittman, I would do. A guy who's, I think 26, 27 years old. He's going to have a future in Indianapolis. He is, again, just a guy who's going to give you solid wide receiver 2 numbers year in and year out. Possibly low-end wide receiver 1. He was a wide receiver 1 last year. So I would be in on Michael Pittman and Josh Downs for that matter. But I don't know. This is actually a good thing. I saw this a couple days ago on Twitter somewhere where people had Downs ahead of Pittman. I don't know if I'm ready to do that. I think the longevity of Michael Pittman speaks for itself. And they're a little bit different of what... Sorry. Stop calling my throat there. They're different wide receivers. And unfortunately, Josh Downs hasn't been able to stay healthy. So it remains to be seen what happens with that wide receiver core. Next things I want to talk about here are Cedric Tillman and Jameis Winston. So we're getting into another quarterback wide receiver duo thing going on here. But going back to last year and a half ago, was a big Cedric Tillman guy. He was my wide receiver 6 or 7. Lost my notebook. I used to keep everything in a notebook, like a handwritten piece of paper notebook of my rankings and stuff like that. I eventually grew up and used a laptop, but, a little too late for that. But I was a big Cedric Tillman guy. Kind of reminded me of an Alshon Jeffrey. Again, back to Alshon Jeffrey. It's the second mention he's gotten on this episode already. Cedric, last 2 weeks, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 81 yards. Very solid game. Comes back the next week, 9 targets, 7 receptions, 99 yards, 2 TDs. Listen, this is the kind of wide receiver that Cleveland has been without. A big body, X-receiver who can go up and get it. They haven't had it. They haven't really used him. They haven't had the quarterback for it. That's a conversation coming up shortly. So I think Cedric Tillman has the opportunity to be that team's wide receiver 2, 2.5, because he is that X. I think he's going to be the X of that team. Now, when it comes to trading for or acquiring or selling Cedric Tillman, I am not giving up an early second for him. I would sell for an early second. I would give a late second, early third for him. Because when we go back, 2 years ago now, he was a mid to late third round pick in fantasy football drafts. So you could give up a late second. I'd feel pretty comfortable with that because, again, you're getting into dart throw territory. And I do think Cedric Tillman has a role in this offense. Jameis Winston has trusted him. The biggest play of the game last week against, again, bad Baltimore defense, but biggest play of the game for the game-winning touchdown was to Cedric Tillman, and you can't understate that. This is a second-year guy. We've kind of been waiting for him. I'm excited for him. I like big-body wide receivers. I just talked about how much I like Michael Pittman, so it makes sense. I think Tillman could be just like a wide receiver 3 flex play for your fantasy rosters going forward. I would say closer to a flex every week the rest of this year, and I think he can continue that into 2025. So we'll see what happens with that. Now, Jameis is an interesting conversation. The first week he came in when DTR got injured, 5 for 11, 67 yards and a TD. Then he comes in the next week against Baltimore, 27 for 41, 334 yards and 3 TDs. The Browns had not had a quarterback named Deshaun Watson throw for more than 200 yards all season, and Jameis did it against Baltimore, a division game. Now, mind you, a depleted Baltimore team. They didn't have Marlon Humphrey. They didn't have Nate Wiggins. I get that. But again, this is a division game with a Cleveland Browns team who hadn't been moving the ball extremely well through the air. So I am very interested to see what happens with Jameis. A 300-yard game against Baltimore is, cool. But to be the only quarterback on that team to throw them more than 200 yards for the season is just hilarious. Of course it has to be Jameis because he's the most hilarious person in the league right now. But what I'm trying to say is I think I'd be comfortable giving up a second or an early third for Jameis because I do think there is a possibility he could be the quarterback next year for Cleveland or the backup if they do decide to figure out with Deshaun Watson and Deshaun Watson loses that job again one way or another. Jameis comes in, steps right up. But this is the second year in a row the Cleveland Browns have had a different quarterback other than Deshaun Watson look better than Deshaun Watson. You had Joe Flacco, the aforementioned Joe Flacco, come in last year and looked really good for Cleveland. And now just Jameis Winston is doing it. So the factor there is Deshaun Watson. He sucks. So I think Jameis Winston either has himself a job in Cleveland or somewhere else next year. So I'm willing to give up that late second, early third for him, 2/3, whatever you really got to do, especially if you're a contender, because I do think Jameis could give you solid QB2 numbers to help you win your leagues. And that's what we're really trying to do here. Especially if he does keep that job or a job. Hopefully he's just not a 30 for 30 guy like he was a few years ago in Tampa. But I think it's all ships ahead or all steam ahead or whatever the hell you call it with the Cleveland Browns offense who has looked better. Elijah Moore, who we've been waiting for years now, really hasn't had a nice few weeks. Jerry Jeudy, who couldn't catch a cold, even though I've had one, has looked better. Cedric Tillman looks great. I don't think the Cleveland Browns are like a playoff team for that matter, but I think they're going to be an annoying team to a lot of teams going the ending stretch here. So, again, I'd be willing to give up a second to win for this year. And if you get a second year out of it, that's even better. And it looks even better, feels even better. Next guy I want to talk about here is a guy I was really high on coming out of that draft as well. It's going to be Tank Dell. Really had his best game this week against the Jets. 9 targets, 6 catches, 126 yards. It was a get-right game for him. Kind of slowed up, was injured, came back from major injury last year, then had an incident where he got shot in the offseason, so he's had a tough go of it. But he looked really good this past week against a pretty stingy Jets defense. And, now that Stephon Diggs is out of the way, I'm back in on Tank Dell. I was scared for him this season because I did think Stephon Diggs was going to eat into anybody. If you go back to our AFC South episode, I mentioned how Stephon Diggs, if he affected anybody, it was going to be Tank Dell because they're relatively similar players. But with Nico Collins coming back, that doesn't really affect Tank because they played 2 different types of wide receiver. So again, Tank Dell right now, according to Keep Trade Cut, is valued as similar to guys as in JSN right now. And I'm kind of going to dig into that a little bit right now. JSN has moved down my rankings, and that sucks because this was the year I really wanted to see something. This was the week I really wanted to see something from JSN without DK Metcalf out there. And we didn't really see it. He was targeted pretty well. He had a decent amount of receptions, but he doesn't look he hasn't shown what Tank Dell has already shown in 2 years. JSN just hasn't shown it yet, and it's frustrating because I was extremely high on him. He was my wide receiver one of that class. I did think he had the opportunity to be a St. Brown light. Unfortunately, he just hasn't shown that yet. I know his A dot is extremely low. Um, I don't. I'm not saying I'm out on JSN, but my hype meter has died down, or my hopium meter has died down. Now, my hopium meter for Tank Dell has gone back up because without Stephon Diggs, without Nico, and with Nico coming back, I think we're going to see the same production we had of Tank Dell last year come back this year, and that's been Stroud's guys, Tank Dell. So I'm back in on Tank. The next couple guys, Keon Coleman, I'm taking Tank over there just based on talent. Xavier Worthy is a little tough because, again, if you guys have followed, I'm extremely high on Xavier Worthy as well. But I believe I would take Tank Dell there. We've seen it. He's been a target earner on that team. We haven't seen the targets yet for Xavier Worthy. I think we will shortly. I apologize for my dogs. Terry McLaurin is another guy that is ranked similarly to Tank on Keep Trade Cut. Win now, I'm taking Terry because Terry has looked really, really, really good with Jaden Daniels. And we've been waiting for this moment with Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels. They've just been finding each other, getting open, going down the field. It's just been great to see this for Terry because even though I'm an Eagles fan, I like Terry McLaurin. I'm glad to see that he's succeeding. And again, I went out and acquired him all offseason. So Terry McLaurin's the guy I would take over Tank Dell right now. And then there's Brandon Ayuk, who has been, unfortunately, after the holdouts and getting paid and wanted to be traded and then getting paid, unfortunately got hurt towards ACL. From a talent aspect, I would take Ayuk, but I feel safer in Tank Dell right now because I know he's healthy right now. I know he is the wide receiver 2 on that team right now, and I think Ayuk is the 1A, 1B with Debo, but then there's Kittle, CMC. There's no one really like that in Houston. So I feel a little bit more comfortable with Tank Dell going forward just based on the team around him. I think they could both be guys who finish similarly to each other. So I'll just go with the little bit younger guy in Tank Dell. So that's what? 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the 5 guys I mentioned, I would take Tank Dell on now. And if I'm in rebuild, I'm not taking Terry McLaurin. So it just depends on the situation. I think Tank Dell is just a really good target earner. That's why I had a lot of picks where I took Tank Dell because I thought he was a guy who was going to get open. They came and said that Stroud wanted him, that was his guy in the draft. And they went and got him for him. They went and got him for him. Sorry, can't talk today, apparently. So I'm excited for the future of Tank Dell. Now, speaking of the future, we're going to look ahead here to the 2025 class. Let me pull this up. Again, I'm not a computer nerd by any stretch of the imagination. So unfortunately, this is going to look not as great as I would have liked it. But here is a look ahead to the 2025 class. We have quarterback of the Miami Hurricanes who balled out today, Cam Ward. We have wide receiver Tre Harris of Ole Miss, who has been balling out. Unfortunately, he's been injured the past 2 weeks. And Mr. Icebox, where his heart used to be, Omarion Hampton, the UNC running back, who also balled out today. We're going to talk about that shortly. But we will start off with Tre Harris. He is 6'2", 210 pounds, my current wide receiver 5. A little early in the process right now. But we mentioned those, go up and get it type wide receivers are the kind of guys I like. And Tre Harris is that guy. Right now, for the NFL draft, I could see him as a late first, second rounder. And I could see the same for Dynasty, just depending on where that goes. If he's a second rounder, then he's a second round pick. Late first, same thing. Just really just depends on how this draft plays out with the quarterbacks and the other positional players on where these guys go in our rookie drafts. And we'll see with Tre, but this is a guy who you'll see in my notes here coming up shortly that I am a fan of. Some stats and more. He is in 2023 at 12 games, 54 yards, 985 yards, 8 TDs. This year, 7 games, 59 receptions, 987 yards, 6 TDs. He missed the last 2 games, so it would look a little bit better, but that's unfortunate. He is still current second in receiving yards for this season, even missing a game. And I'm sure that's probably changed now that he's missed his second game in a row. But some PFF grades I have here. Receiving grade of 90.1, which is the highest. Contested catch rate, 42.9. It's a bit average. Yards per route run, 5.25, which is solid. Yak, 7.8, which is very good. But he was PFF's mid-season Bolitnikov winner. That was a mouthful for me. That's why I had to slow down there for a second. Let's get into what I like and do not like about Tre Harris. The games I have watched, I watched a couple games of his 2023 film, LSU, Penn State, Kentucky, which was this year, South Carolina, Wake Forest, all 3 this year. Some things I really like about Tre are his physicality, and that goes kind of hand in hand with contested catch, that he is a guy who's not afraid to get handsy with a DB, not afraid to run through a person, not afraid to go up and get it. Those are the kind of wide receivers I like. Those, almost like rebounders in basketball, the guys who get dirty, guys who are not afraid to get, a little physical when they need to. And that's Tre Harris to me. And again, that's ball tracking as well, because he, Jackson Dart puts it up to him and he goes and finds it for him. And that we've seen that in multiple occasions so far this season. He was second best in receiving for a reason. So yards after catch, I mentioned the 7.8. If you give this dude space, he is going to attempt to take it to the house. I'm sorry my dogs are barking, but my wife went out to dinner, and they just want to yell at everybody that walks by or even breathes in our house's direction. So I apologize for that. But he's also a dude that runs hard. Again, with the physicality, he's going to try to run over. It doesn't always work for him, but he's going to fall forward, get you those extra yardage that you need. But again, in space, this dude can take it to the house. And I noticed from the 2023 games compared to 2024, he does have a bit more twitch or salesmanship in his routes. There were a couple instances where on double moves, he sold it well enough to get the DB to bite. And that was not something I really saw as good in 2023. In 2023, I thought he was very stiff. Even though I still liked him, I thought his routes were stiff in 2023. I think he looks a little bit more loose this year. And that's something you want to see from your wide receivers year to year is improvement. And that's a positive. Cons I have on Tre Harris is limited route tree. This dude does a lot of comeback routes. He does them well. So I'm not going to fault him for what he does well, but it's a lot of comebacks, a lot of hitches. But those are his kind of bread and butter. They like to do screens with him as well. Again, nothing wrong with that. But I would like to see a little bit more advancement in his route tree, a little bit more comfortability with watching him is when they're doing more than just comebacks, more than hitches. Shows it could just be the Ole Miss offense, so I would have no idea. But I would like to see a little bit more from him because I do think he can do it. I do think he does some of those things, even though that it's limited. I do think he does those things well. Long speed. I did say he can take it to the house, but the dude just does not look like he's shot out of a cannon or anything like that. But I do think that's not the worst thing in the world. He is going to get caught from behind, but he's also going to get you 40. So we'll see with that. Release. This dude coming off the line of scrimmage can look a little slow. I would like to see him get off a little quicker. Kind of sometimes look like he has a piano on his back when he's coming off the line. But again, these are all things that he can improve, especially the release. I think release can get better the more he gets more comfortable or better at other things. He's quickness, I think, is more or less what I'm trying to say. The quicker he gets, the better for him. Because I don't think he's the quickest wide receiver in this draft. I think he's a very good prospect. I think this is a guy that could go to the Senior Bowl and show out and make a lot of ooh and ah plays and get a team excited. Gets a guy like me excited. And I do think that, he could be a very good X wide receiver for an NFL franchise, almost a la Cedric Tillman. Kind of like a Cedric Tillman, actually, now that you think about it. Now that I say it out loud, I didn't think about it before, but sometimes talking to myself will get me through this thing. For some people call it a mental illness. Sometimes I talk about getting through things. So, yeah, I think Tre could be a very solid early second round pick in the NFL draft. I could see late if he goes to the Senior Bowl and balls out because those things kind of happen. So let's get into our next guy. This is a guy who I got to watch more today, just live. That's going to be Cam Ward, QB, Miami. 6'3", 225. Would have been, so I'm not far enough in the QB class right now to give you rankings or anything like that. But if Cam Ward would have came out last year and this season he has now would have been last year. I know you can't do that, but the way I'm doing this is the way I'm doing it. So shut up. He would have been my QB 4 or 5 last year. He would have been behind Drake May, and I would have had him. It's tough. I can't decide if I would have had him above Michael Penix. Landing spot probably would have changed that. Like if he would have went in and been the starter, I probably would have had Cam Ward over Penix. But again, can't really go back and look at it like that. Dude's uber talented. I definitely think he's a first round pick in the NFL draft. It could be the 101. He's showing it right now. We're going to talk about that here shortly. First round pick lock for sure if that happens in Superflex Dynasty drafts. This is a dude I'm excited about. I'm excited about Tre. I'm excited about all three of these guys. These are three, should have prefaced this. These are three my guys. So, yeah, not the best podcast host when I can't tell you what's really going on in my brain. But anyway, 2023, 12 games, 323 yards, 323 attempt or completions to 485 yards. Man, I can't talk. 66.6% completion percentage, 3,736 yards, 25 TDs, 7 interceptions. That was last year. This year so far, it's definitely upgraded after this past game. But 8 games, 191 completions, 281 attempts, 68% completion percentage, 2,746 yards, 24 TDs, 5 INTs. You notice how I didn't struggle with the 2,000, but I struggled with the 3,000 because I didn't put that damn comma in there. So, again, making fun of myself. This is what I do. Anyway, PFF grades. Passing grade of 90.3, which was the highest in PFF. No pressure grade, 91.8. Pressure grade, 66.4. A big time throw rate, 6.5%, which is solid. PFF's currently second. Yeah, PFF's highest rated QB currently. He was also, I just looked this up before I came on, second best Heisman odds according to MGM. I think after this game that just happened or just ended recently, those odds may have gone up. This is going to be tough because I really like Cam Ward. Do I think he deserves a Heisman? Absolutely. I'll eventually talk about Ashton Genty, but that dude probably does deserve the Heisman a little bit more. But again, it's neither here nor there. Cam Ward's balling out. Let's get into what I liked about him on film. Oh, real quick, going back to his stats from this year going forward. He just threw for 5 TDs and 400 yards. So those numbers have now gone up into over 3,000 yards. He's at 29 TDs now after this past week. So the dude is absolutely crushing it. And he looked super impressive today. When I talk about the film review, a lot of the things that I saw in this film showed today, both good and bad. So what I like, or games I watched on Cam Ward first are California, Florida, FSU, and now the game against Duke live, as well as the FSU game. Pros. Dude has absolute ice in his veins. And I know I sound corny saying it like that, but when the game is on the line, when you need a big time play, when the play breaks down and it goes into the play is never over thing I have here, this dude does not panic under pressure at all. Unlike myself coming on here and talking and stuttering my way through, I show signs of pressure. Cam Ward has absolutely no signs of pressure. He is fearless when it comes to the big play, the big down, things breaking down. He is what you want in a quarterback when things go haywire. Arm angles. every almost every other play, this dude's throwing sidearm, getting around, blitzers with sidearms and stuff like that. So his arm angles are very impressive. Again, I mentioned play is never over. We saw it today with a TD pass. Pocket collapsed, had to scramble out. I believe it was right. Throw a dot. Did get tipped. Could have been picked, but landed in his wide receiver's hands nonetheless. And guess what? That's a touchdown. So, again, he will not let the play die. And that will go into his cons in a little bit as well. I think he identifies the blitz extremely well. There are especially this. There were several instances on his film where he saw the corner blitz coming and got it out quick to the receiver that DB would have been covering before the safety could drop down. Again, that goes back into ice in his veins because you have to get that ball out hot. You have to be able to understand that that corner's coming to take you out and get that ball out quick. And he does that, not even just with corners, with linebackers as well. He identifies that it's coming, and he's just a smart processor. I guess I could have just summed it up with that. But next thing I like, anticipatory throws. That was a tough word for me to get out, but I got it. He puts the ball where his wide receivers are going constantly, especially those plays where, he probably could have been brought down. He's going to put it out there for his wide receivers to go get it. And that's actually a pro that I forgot to put in here as well. He trusts his wide receivers. He believes in them and himself that they're going to make a play. And that's a big thing with anticipatory throws because you have to be able to trust that your wide receivers are going to get where they're supposed to go and make that play for you. So that's a big thing that I really liked about Cam Ward and why I could see him being my QB1 for this class. Again, still really early in the QB watching process, but it would not shock me if he was my QB1 going forward. Some cons kind of goes back to what I was saying. Too much trust in his arm at times. He thinks he can make every single throw in the world, and I don't doubt that he thinks he can, or I don't doubt that he can, but maybe you should get rid of it. Maybe don't put it all in harm's way. He did it today. Believe it or not, he scrambled out again, left, I believe, and then threw it back across his body, right, and it was picked off. Those are the kind of plays that you see from time to time in his film that will make you frustrated. That's just a guy who believes in himself and believes in his arm talent, believes in his wide receivers that they can make a play, that maybe sometimes you need to let the play go. Maybe sometimes you need to throw that one away and move on to the next one. Because you can't give the ball over to Duke in that situation because Duke kept that game close for a minute and then, Cam came back and blew the doors off them. But one thing I didn't like, I noticed when he does scramble out, he will sometimes slow by the sidelines, I guess try to fake a player out. Can't do that in the NFL. You're going to get smacked. That is something he's going to have to stop doing. Likes to throw with juice. And what I mean by that, he puts a lot of heat on the ball when he doesn't really have to. He does have nice touch in his throws, but at times he will put a little too much of a heater instead. I think he needs to be able to recognize that not every ball has to be 99 miles an hour. And I think that's going to come. This dude is an all-out talent. I do think he's a top 10 pick in this draft. This dude can make every throw, like I mentioned. One thing I like about him is that he is mobile enough to scramble, but is willing to throw it. And I like that a lot. I like the fact that he is not always going to scramble out and take the chance of taking a big hit as to where he could get injured. And I like that. It shows, some intelligence, I guess, is where I'm going with this. Is he's more of a pocket passer than a outright mobile QB. Next guy who I'm really excited to talk about is, again, Mr. Icebox, where his heart used to be, Omarion Hampton, 5'11", 220, would have been my RB1 in 2023. Again, me cheating a little bit. and saying, going back to the 2023 class, he would have been my RB1 over Jonathan Brooks, over Bucky Irving. May get some heat for that. It is what it is. But this dude is an absolute baller. He isn't my RB1 of this class right now. It's going to be Genty. I'm not far enough. He's probably right now, as it stands, he's my RB2-3 with Judkins. But I'm going to say I would take Hampton over Judkins right now. I could see him as a late second, probably more likely a third in this NFL drafty word if he does declare, because he does have another year of eligibility. So all depends on really what he decides to do with his draft status. Stats and more. 2023, 13 games, 254 attempts, 1,500 yards rushing, which is absolutely insane. 5.9 average, 15 TDs, 29 receptions, 222 yards, solid receiving stats. 2024 stats, 8 games so far, 181 attempts, 1,006 yards, 5.6 average, 9 TDs, 23 receptions, 172 yards. So we are seeing a little bit more reception work, but that's not even including what he did today. We're going to talk about that right now. 35 touches, 265 total yards, and 5 TDs, 4 on the ground, 1 through the air. That play that was through the air, I can barely call it through the air, was one of those like little shuffle passes where it just, play broke down and QB flipped it to him as soon as he could. And, Hampton took it to the house. Very impressive player. I am super excited about Hampton. PFF grades, 80.8 grade PFF, 4.27 yards after contact, 131.7 elusive rating. He is currently 6th in college in yards per game, 125.8, which is absolutely, that's an insane number. It's so funny looking at college running backs right now with Genty averaging, I think I looked at it earlier, it was 190 yards a game. Caleb, his name's escaping me, from Iowa right now. I think he's at 140, 150, something like that, averaging a game. It's just wild right now. We're going to have a very talented running back class coming for 2025. And Hampton, even being 6, 125 per game, absolutely no slouch. You heard me with SC Romero a few weeks ago talking about Hampton and how much I really liked him. So let's go into this next slide here. I wish I was better with slides and, showed in, some slide in effects and everything like that for you guys. But I'm not as advanced. I'm not as good as my 4th grade self when we're learning PowerPoint. Games watched: Minnesota, NC Central, Virginia, Miami, and then I watched the game against FSU today live. Pros: strong runner, impressive contact balance. Again, we talked about it in this last slide. 4.27 yards after contact, extremely impressive. He is the run through a motherfucker face, as Marshawn Lynch used to say. This, I hate to say it, I'm going to say it again. He reminds me, I hate to say it because I know people are going to come at me because it's such a huge comp, but I comp him to Jonathan Taylor with the way he runs. I think Taylor's got more wiggle. We'll talk about that here shortly. But I think their running styles are very similar. They're both big, bulky dudes. I think I did forget to mention that Hampton is 5'11", 220. But it's so impressive. His contact. If you hear me say falling forward, when it comes to contact balance and being a strong runner, it is one of my favorite things about running backs is when you're falling forward, or a wide receiver for that matter. When you have the ball in your hands and you're falling forward, it means you're getting more yards for your team, and that's what your team wants, obviously. Vision and patience. This dude has no problem, finding the hole or waiting for the hole to open. He's not rushing anything, right? Which is extremely impressive. He lets, things open up, or he makes it happen. So when I say he's not super elusive or didn't have a whole lot of wiggle, I actually will say he has a lot more wiggle behind the line of scrimmage than he does in the open field, because you constantly see him on this film bouncing back or cutting back to get into an open lane, or faking one way, going another. It's very impressive how he's able to find that open hole, even having to make something out of nothing. Burst, I think he's a very shot out of a cannon type running back. I think he runs strong and hard, fast. Not actually fast, but burst is what I mean. His initial burst behind the line is super impressive to me, and he's got very solid hands. He's 29 receptions, 22 so far this year. Not the biggest numbers, but again, he's a capable back. He's a capable pass catcher, and that's something we need for fantasy football, obviously. So it's something that I really enjoy in his game. Some cons. I mentioned being fast. I didn't mean fast because I think his long sleeves. It's winter time. Wear your long sleeves. But his long speed is not the best. I do think that he can get brought down from behind. Again, he's still falling forward, but we did see him today get a 51-yard reception. But I think if that was any longer, he might have gotten caught. But again, he could be a guy who's probably going to run in the 4.5s in his 40. But I think all his other measurables are going to be great. I think his quickness, like I mentioned, his burst are all going to be impressive. His footwork's going to be good. So at times with running backs, I can look past the long speed, especially if you have burst and acceleration and the footwork to make it work, even without the long speed. I mentioned the wiggle in the open field isn't the best. It's not something that that's not his game, I guess you could say. He's not going to make the guy miss in the open field. He's not going to put on the spin move, the juke moves. He's going to run through you. And that's okay. There are running backs that do that. There are running backs that are going to rather run through your face than make you miss. But again, I do think his wiggle behind the line of scrimmage is super impressive. So I do think he has it. It's just not something he does in the open field. He'd rather run through you than away from you, I guess. So these are three guys I've been super impressed with so far this season in Tre Harris, Cam Ward, and Omarion Hampton. I think all three of these guys have future dynasty assets written all over them. And I'm very excited to see what their draft capital looks like, because we are in November now, just turned into November. We're 5 months away from the NFL draft, so it's coming, and it's going to be here soon because the season's almost over. Scouting seasons for me, it's already started. I'm starting to watch these guys more and more. I started watching some of their 23 film, and now that the 2024 stuff, I'm starting to ramp back up again. And these are three guys that have me very excited. And I think I'm going to start doing maybe a profile or two a week during the regular conversation of Dynasty, because this is the time to start noticing these names, because one, Dynasty never sleeps, but you have to make a decision on what you want to do with your roster at this point. Are you going all in? Are you willing to give up the possibility of getting a Cam Ward or an Omarion Hampton or a Tre Harris to acquire these players that can help you win right now? Or are you looking towards the future and maybe you can get yourself an Omarion Hampton or Cam Ward, or the guys I even mentioned tonight, like Evan Stewart, or I just thought of Evan Stewart off the top of my head because he had made an amazing catch in the back of the end zone today, but Tet McMillan, those guys. So this is the time you need to start paying attention to what the next year is going to bring, because what your roster is doing right now. It all depends on what your roster is doing. So that'll be it for tonight. I appreciate you guys. If you've listened, this show will also be up in podcast form. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you do enjoy it. I appreciate all the listens and feedback I get for this podcast. If you do enjoy the profiles, I am going to start doing more as the weeks go on. Maybe not every week, but I'm going to try to do some coming in the next few weeks, because this is something I really enjoy doing. I love watching film. It's super exciting to me. It could be boring to a lot of people, but Rich should be back next week. He's got some really exciting news that he would like to break for himself, I'm sure. I can't wait to hear from him. even though we talk every day. But again, this will be it for the Dynasty Dogs. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good night.